This story was told by my grandma. I'm not sure if it's true. Whenever I asked, she'd just say, "Kids shouldn't ask too many questions." It happened in the 90s, and it was a big deal in the small town back then when my grandma's sister's son and daughter-in-law both died suddenly. The story begins 15 years before the couple's death on a cold winter night. Their 9-year-old daughter, Lily, went missing. Her parents, Lee and May, put up countless missing person posters all over the town, calling her name, searching for her with the police and friends. But all efforts were in vain, and gradually, the neighbors' comforting words faded away, and people began to accept this tragedy. Everyone assumed that Lily was taken by traffickers. For Lee and May, Lily's disappearance was a wound that never healed, and even 15 years later, it still hurt deeply. Over the years, the couple lived a miserable life. They never had another child. Lee worked at a gas station, and May was an accountant at a kindergarten. After the incident, they both became quiet and withdrawn, rarely socializing. May's mother-in-law, Lily's grandmother, felt heartbroken seeing them like this, but whenever she thought of her missing granddaughter, she couldn't bring herself to smile either. I remember my grandma also helped in searching for Lily during those years. Lee and May felt guilty and afraid, always blaming themselves for not taking better care of their daughter. They couldn't truly face each other, and their relationship became distant and cold. Though life went on, they were tormented by nightmares and guilt every night, especially when they saw those missing person posters still hanging on the walls, weighing heavily on their hearts. 15 years later, on what would have been Lily's birthday, something strange happened. That night, the couple, who rarely sat together for dinner, were eating when the phone suddenly rang. May put down her chopsticks, her eyes filled with confusion. The phone was newly installed, and hardly anyone knew the number, so she picked it up puzzled.
Hello? Mom? Dad?
A trembling young girl's voice came from the other end. May froze, her hand shaking so much she almost dropped the phone. The voice was so familiar, as if it had traveled from 15 years ago. It was Lily's voice. Lily? May's voice was barely a whisper, filled with doubt and a hint of fear.
It's me, Mom.
The voice was choked with emotion, as if it had crossed a vast distance and time. Lee hurried over, staring at his wife in the phone, his heart pounding and his face turning pale. He shook his head instinctively. It couldn't be. How could Lily be calling them? On the other end of the line, there was static, like someone softly sobbing.
Mom? Dad? Why did you leave me? Do you know I've been looking for you all this time?
May's heart felt like it was being squeezed, and she could barely breathe. She looked at Lee, who was covering his mouth with his hand, his eyes filled with disbelief and fear. Lily, we thought you were... May's voice trembled, unable to finish her sentence. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a cold laugh.
You thought I was dead? No, Mom and Dad, I've been watching you live, watching you eat, watching you go on with every day without me.
May gasped, her fingers trembling as she hung up the phone. Lee quickly grabbed her shoulders. It can't be. It must be some kind of prank. Lee's voice was also trembling, but more like he was trying to convince himself. Just then, the doorbell rang. They looked at each other, their hearts seeming to stop. Who would visit at this hour? They had become used to staying home and rarely had visitors, especially at night. Lee forced down his fear, walked to the door, and put his hand on the doorknob. The cold wind seeped through the gap, chilling his fingers. When he opened the door, there stood a girl who looked exactly like Lily, even wearing the same red coat she had on when she disappeared.
Mom, Dad, I'm back.
The girl smiled, her voice playful and clear, still sounding like a child. May collapsed to the floor, tears blurring her vision. Lee's lips trembled, unable to speak. Suddenly, the girl's smile vanished, replaced by a look of hatred.
Why did you do it? Why did you leave me in that freezing lake? Why push me? Did you think I would forgive you?
Her voice rose from a whisper to a sharp scream, cutting straight to the soul. Dark memories flashed through Lee's mind, those suppressed moments coming back to life. It was a cold night when Lily ran out after being scolded for her poor grades. They had chased after her and found her by the lake, but she refused to come home. The argument escalated. In a fit of rage, May lost control and pushed Lily. They watched in horror as she fell into the icy water. They froze, unable to move, as they saw her struggling in the lake. The slope to the lake was steep, and within a minute or two, she disappeared beneath the water. They scrambled down to search, but the lake soon turned calm, and they couldn't find her. For some reason, they didn't call the police. Everything seemed frozen, and in the biting cold, they decided to cover up the truth, pretending that Lily had simply gone missing. Now, seeing this figure before them, those dreadful memories resurfaced, becoming vivid once again. Lee increasingly felt that this wasn't an illusion, but that their past had somehow come back to haunt them. The girl slowly approached them, her face twisted into a strange smile, her lips moving as if whispering something. "Are you ready to come with me?" A sudden gust of wind blew out the lights in the house, plunging everything into darkness. May and Lee's screams echoed through the house, then everything fell silent. The next morning, neighbors found Lee and May's door wide open. They were both lying dead on the floor. The police were called, but with limited technology at the time, they concluded it was sudden cardiac arrest, possibly from fright. In that empty house, the only thing left was the old missing person poster on the wall, swaying slightly in the wind, Lily's smile seeming to follow every visitor, her lips curved in a strange, indescribable way. Later, the police found a diary in Lee's house, kept in a cookie tin, along with important items like bank books and keys. The diary detailed what had happened to Lily that night and ended with the couple's acknowledgement that they knew it wasn't over, that they would eventually face retribution.